Questions of the bill being now read a second time. I call the member for Newcastle.
Thank you, and I rise tonight to speak against the Kosciuszko Wild Horse Heritage Bill 2018. This unprecedented bill is a personal project for the Deputy Premier in consultation with former Nationals member for Monero and horse trek business owner Peter Cochrane. The bill throws away 75 years of conservation consensus and undermines the entire national parks and wildlife system. This bill seeks to place wild, feral horses above all other environmental and cultural values within the Kosciuszko National Park. If this bill is passed, it will lead to irreversible damage to soil, water, including the Murray and Murrumbidgee rivers, unique and threatened species, and endangered ecological communities within Kosciuszko National Park. It also undermines the Aboriginal cultural heritage of the park and risks public safety. Failure to protect the park will lead to a loss of jobs and tourism investment that are vital to the region. Something I think that seems to be lost on those on the other side, the issue of jobs and tourism investment. Kosciuszko National Park is the most visited national park in New South Wales outside the Greater Sydney region, with visitation growing by 52% from 2014 to 2016 at over 2.196 million visits each year. Specifically, this bill puts the recognition and protection of heritage value for feral horses populations within parts of Kosciuszko National Park above all other species by requiring a draft wild horse heritage management plan to be prepared. This plan would be required to identify the heritage value of sustainable feral horse populations within identified parts of the park and set out how that heritage value will be protected while ensuring other environmental values of the park, including values identified in the plan of management for the park, are also maintained. However, the bill does fail to define heritage value, sustainable wild horse populations, identified parts of the park, or other environmental values of the park. This minister is given discretion to alter the draft plan as they see fit before adopting the plan. This bill creates a wild horse community advisory panel appointed by the minister, which also provide advice on the preparation of the plan. This bill overrides the National Parks and Wildlife Act. This is unprecedented. This bill also provides that should there be any inconsistency between the adopted wild horse management plan and the National Parks Plan of Management, the Wild Horse Management Plan prevails. Unbelievable. Further, the bill specifies that the Plan of Management for Kosciuszko National Park must ensure that it recognises the heritage value of sustainable wild horse populations within parts of the park. It also sets aside provisions of the National Parks and Wildlife Act 1967 that prohibits any operations from being undertaken on national park land that do not accord with the park's plan of management. Finally, this bill actually ignores the careful recommendations of the 2016 Draft Wild Horse Management Plan, completely ignores them, and does not provide a humane approach to the management of wild horse populations within the park. Prior to this bill, the 2016 Draft Wild Horse Management Plan was yet to be endorsed by the government. It was the result of years of community consultation, in-depth reviews of the scientific evidence of the impact of wild horses on the alpine environment of Kosciuszko National Park. It recommended reducing the population from 6,000 to less than 3,000 in 5 to 10 years, and then 600 horses within 20 years. The culling and methods of culling are the most controversial aspects of this debate. The second reading speech claimed this bill would ensure that no horse would be shot or culled except in circumstances where a horse is injured or sick. However, the bill makes no provision for this in any way. The bill does not deal with the methods of population control nor humaneness of such methods. The speech also stated the government will appoint a new independent technical reference group, implement a research monitoring program, undertake a new count of horse numbers, and implement a marketing campaign for rehoming of horses. These are not provisions of the bill, and there is no funding to be identified. Now, the second reading speech of Deputy Premier John Barilaro's bill did have a few little furphies within it. And since his speech, these have been revealed to be incorrect. Barilaro, the Deputy Premier, told Parliament that Brumbies from the Snowy Mountains had an integral role in the Australian Light Horse campaign during World War I. However, the cultural heritage of this report, prepared for the National Parks Wildlife Service, finds no definitive evidence that this was the case, simply that it was possible that some went into service. It's not surprising that Brumbies from Kosciuszko were not a key source of horses for World War I. Brumbies were of poor quality and usefully and viewed as only useful for meat exports. Horses that actually did support the war effort were the whalers. They were bred in their thousands across Australia to support colonial expansion and export trades. Also, the Premier, today that whaler breed is secured, and there are 2 established stud lines for that. The Deputy Premier also asserted that Brumbies would not have been used at the opening ceremony if they were of the Sydney Olympic Games if they were not considered to be part of the Australia of today. Well, in fact, the horses at the Sydney Olympics were Australian stock horses, a breed largely established from 15 founding horses selected in 1970s. They were not Brumbies. The cultural ties that people from the Snowy Mountains in Australia have is real, and it is important to celebrate. But the cultural aspects of Brumbies in this region can be maintained with, for example, as they've done in South Australia's Coffin Bay, Brumby herds held on private property. So I think we should look beyond the Deputy Premier's information on Brumby history and management options, and we will not support this ill-thought-through wild horse bill because it ignores science. It ignores the irreversible damage that unmanaged wild horse populations have done to Kosciuszko National Park. And this magnificent park is a tourism jobs powerhouse, which, as I said before, seems to be lost on those on the other side. This magnificent national park, established in 1944 by Labor Premier Bill McKell, holds very special significance to Australia with its unique environment, being home to many threatened species, such as the mountain pygmy possum, the southern corroboree frog, and the broad-toothed rat. The park is home to 21 species of flowering plants in the mountains that are found nowhere else on this earth. The peatland soils are unique, as are the alpine and subalpine bog and wetland catchments, which help to supply high-quality water to the Murray-Darling Basin. Have you on the other side actually thought about these issues? The entire park is listed as a biosphere reserve by UNESCO, and Blue Lake is listed as a wetland of international importance under the Ramsar Convention. Not only do we have irrefutable scientific evidence opposing this bill, we actually have the RSPCA coming out against it as well. They say this government's plan ignores evidence and should be reconsidered. The RSPCA, and this government is so concerned about the animal issues in terms of culling and others, and you get the RSPCA out here saying this government will veto evidence-based management of their environmental impact, an absolute disgrace. It's not only that, but it's the 7CIUCN, which is an amazing international organisation that is based in Switzerland, Geneva, and they've come out very strongly against this as well. They've written to Gabrielle Upton, the Minister, and I might just conclude by quoting some of this. As a science-based organisation, we are well aware that there's a strong scientific basis for asserting that wild horses negatively affect the integrity of the park and the values for which it was established. This is supported by the government's own Threatened Species Scientific Committee, which determined recently that feral horses were a key threatening process affecting the integrity of this protected area. It absolutely beggars belief that this government is introducing this bill that flies in the face of all their own research and government-endorsed research for the simple sake of the Deputy Premier's electorate down there on the south coast. So, you know, if you want to look at the science-based research, you want to look at the facts and figures, you want to actually base a decision on something that has scientific rigour.
I'd thank the member for Newcastle. His time's expired. The question is Bill